Well, all right, it's great to be here. This is our second episode of Winning with Water. I'm Donnell, and this is,
Bill.
and we're excited to talk to you today about winning with mentorship and sponsorship. So, Bill, why don't you jump right in and tell us what are your thoughts on mentorship?
Well, I put a lot of value in mentorship. I think, mentorship goes both ways. I get mentored in a lot of ways when I mentor someone else. I'm learning a lot about each person has different skills to bring to the table. Each person teaches me something along the way, and I'm trying to impart those skills that I want to teach these people about water and how to be how do we perform as water workers, and what is it that makes that job attractive, and how can I help them with the skills that I've gotten over the last 35 years? How can I help them to be successful? And that's the goal.
Excellent. And I'll talk a little bit about sponsorship. So, while a mentor is someone who puts time into building a relationship with you and directly imparts into you and helps you be better and brings you along. A sponsor is someone who speaks up for you when you're not in the room. So a sponsor is typically somebody who's in a position of power or someone who has access. So someone who has a seat at the table and speaks on behalf of you. So both mentors and sponsors are important. We all need someone to pour into us, someone to encourage us, someone to provide us with direction. But we also need someone who will speak up for us in rooms we're not in, at tables that we're not sitting on. So your thoughts on the relationship between mentorship and sponsorship?
Well, I'm in a group right now that I'm learning about diversity leadership, and I met a mayor of a town in South Carolina a couple of months ago, and the mayor told me she's a black female mayor in a small rural community in South Carolina, and she was the first black female mayor of that town. And so when she went in and they were running, the mayor retired, and she was on the council, and a lot of the people looked, like me, they were on the council, and she was in that room, and I was having this conversation with her, and she said that when she was in the room, they were talking about the next mayor and who's going to run for mayor. And she said that they said these right in front of her. They said these things. They said like, well, maybe the town is ready for a black mayor, but it's going to have to be a man. So they made these comments, and I'm reading a book called The Memo, which kind of talks about women of color having a place at the table. And I asked her, how did that make her feel? So the way she was describing how that made her feel, she said that she really had more credentials than about half the people in the room, and that she was like, why wouldn't it be a woman? And she said, Bill, I would have loved to have had someone like you in the room with me that could stand up and say, hey guys, wait, she's got just as good a criteria as you do. And to have that voice of someone who looks like me, who looks like them, standing up for her and being that sponsor and being that person, not only she was in the room, but when she's not in the room, to have that voice to speak up for her.
And that's priceless. And I think we have spent considerable time talking about mentorship. I don't think there's a professional that we know that does not understand mentorship. But I think sponsorship is the secret sauce, the secret weapon, the thing that is not leveraged enough, where people have to understand their power and what may cost you nothing to just say a good word about someone else could be the most valuable thing in that person's life. And that's the funny thing about sponsorship. It doesn't cost you much, but it's so valuable to that person. For you just to say, hey, what do you think about him? What do you think about her? She's pretty good. Or, you know what? I've worked with her before, and man, she's on top of her stuff. You just drop your time in the conversation and you're done. And everybody's like, well, really? I didn't know that. And it's interesting how it didn't cost you nothing. I mean, and I'm being double negative to emphasize it didn't cost you nothing to see
That's right.
something nice about that person, to give that person an upper hand because you have power and leveraging your power, sharing your power helps you to be a sponsor for somebody. And,
Mm-hmm.
I like that type of thing because it really shows you how important it is to share power. Because when people have power, uh, typically you don't realize one little statement that you make can change somebody's life. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think probably a lot of people like don't realize that they are in a position where their voice may be heard more than others. It's not necessarily something that they've done as much as it is, hey, he looks like me, he talks like me, he has a voice. And you don't look like me, you don't talk like me. Maybe you should just be quiet right now. And I think that sometimes that perception, I heard recently about some young people that were at a table with some older people, and the young people were trying to offer their opinion. And one person in the crowd, I wasn't there, I just heard this secondhand, that one person in the crowd said, well, maybe you should just be quiet because you really don't have enough experience to be weighing in on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what we've seen a lot of. The people that are in power stay in power, and they're not bringing people along. But what we don't realize is all those people are aging out, and we've got to replace those people with other workers that are just as passionate as they are. They might not look like them, but they're going to be just as passionate about those jobs as they are.
Yeah, and what you just described is like the opposite of it. Like there are people who are doing directly the opposite of being a sponsor. I've been in a situation where I had someone who was the direct opposite of a sponsor. So I knew when I was not in the room, he was using his power to make my life harder. Because I've seen opportunities that I had evaporate and I thought I had it. And I find out later because he went around me and was like, nah, he shouldn't be doing that. That's too high up for him, or that's whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So people have done the opposite, which means we understand the concept of speaking up for somebody because we can speak against and we can speak down of people and totally impact their careers. They could not get a promotion, they could not get a job, they could not get a promotion, then not get an opportunity because you did not say something or you said something negative that was
Mm-hmm.
unnecessary. Like, why did you do that? Like, what does it do for you? It doesn't do you anything. You don't get anything out of messing somebody else's situation up. And I think the other thing I realize is you have to recognize your power because sometimes people aren't intentionally misusing their power. They
Right.
don't realize they have power. They just think, no, I'm just having a conversation. I'm just cracking a joke. I'm just hanging out with my fellow executive buddies. Yeah, you have power, and why aren't you using it for something that is
Good.
meaningful?
Right.
Which brings me to the question of, you know, have you spoken up for anybody? And has anybody spoken up for you? What is it like to have somebody speak up for you or to have spoken up for someone?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a direct connection with that, and I'm going to try to keep this as clandestine as I can. I was in a position where I did get a position of power, and I became an owner of a company, and I had hired a young lady to come work for me and for us at the company, and then we'd hired several young men in the meantime that came in, and it was a serious situation for me because when I became an owner, I got to see a lot of the information that I didn't see before. And now, while none of these directly worked for me, I was in that group and I was in charge of a lot of the aspects of that group. And I started seeing these salaries, and I found out that this young lady was like seriously below what the couple of men that had come in were making, and she had been there like a year or two longer. And I literally kind of went off the chart a little bit, Donnell. I'm going to be honest with you. I went into the board meeting and I went off the chart a little bit. I got on my soapbox and I may have pounded my hands on the table a little bit. Just saying, I was pretty mad about it. So these people weren't in the room. It goes right back to what you were saying. I mean, I was in the room. She was not in the room. And I said, you will fix this. She will not be making less than these guys who have been working a lot less, 2 years less than she had been. And they fixed it. And she's actually still with that company, and she's doing quite well. And I think, just that's my direct line of being in the room and fighting for someone who was egregiously being overlooked because of her gender.
That's awesome. And I'll tell you my inspiration as it comes to sponsorship, because of some of the experiences I have had where I was underpaid, where I was underappreciated, where I wasn't promoted, and I saw people get promoted past me. I was that lady. So I know what it's like not to be a year or two. I'm talking about years ahead, 4 years ahead, and watch somebody come out of school who would have been in high school when I was graduating college get promoted past me in the same company and wonder what is going on. And when I get in a position of power, realize I can't let what happened to me happen to someone else. I have to be intentional to say, I know the sting of watching people pass you, and you're like, man, I got the same degree. In fact, I have more degrees. I have more experience. You can't tell me everybody's smarter than me here. Like, I just don't believe this. You can't tell me everybody is inherently better at anything than I am, even though I felt that way. So I was like, you know what? Once I get in a position of leadership, I have to ensure that doesn't happen to anybody else. So I've been known to be the person in a room to be like, hey, she needs to get what she needs to get. Like, I recommend her to get. Well, I don't think well, you know what? I don't care what you think. Like, she needs to get treated with respect. And I've been known,
on the table.
I've been known to be, I mean, I can get real fast because it's personal for me. Because I know what it's like to be that person. So as a result, when I see injustice taking place, I take it personally. And I am that person who will get in your face and say, no, this is wrong. And I'm not letting it go. Like, fix it now. Or you're going to have a problem with me personally, because this needs to stop. It has to stop. It has to stop now.
Yeah. So Donnell, really, honestly, you're an overachiever, because I looked at your thing. You got like 27 states where you're a professional engineer. Isn't that right? Like 27?
It's 30.
Okay. So you're an overachiever anyway.
Yeah. And it's sad, but true. There's a story behind that. I finally got into a position where I had a sponsor. And that was my supervisor at the time. In the company I was at, he was the director of engineering. And he had like 15 PEs. And he said to me, you need to get the same thing that I have. Every PE I have, you need to have. And he had just studied and passed the California PE. And he was like, you need to get the California PE also. And he was one of those people who we would be in a meeting and a structural engineering question would come up and he would be like, so what do you think we should do, Donald? And I'm like, for me? Yeah, you're the subject matter expert. And the weird thing is I'd never experienced that before. Like, I'd always felt underappreciated, talked down to, second guessed, overlooked. And then here comes this person and he was like, tell us what we're doing. You're the expert. And for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of responsibility that I had never felt before, to the point where I found myself studying again. I was like, well, I better get in these books again. I better know what I'm talking about because somebody's actually listening.
So how did it make you feel to get that kind of acknowledgement from somebody in power like him?
It felt amazing, but it's funny. It felt scary because I think of it like, if you're always in a cage and somebody finally lets you out, you think you're just going to run free. No, it's scary. You come out and you look around and you're like, I don't even know what to do with myself. And that's how I felt. I was like, what do you mean? What do I think? Like, it was a weird feeling. It was strange, you know. And I just remembered just the terror of, hold on, they're actually listening to me now. I actually have a voice. I need to be responsible for what I'm saying. I need to be considerate of what I'm doing because now somebody cares about what I'm saying. So it was strange. Like, it wasn't fun at the beginning. It was just this awe, this sense of responsibility, this sense of, I gotta get this right, because they're actually listening to me now. Because before, when they would listen, I was like, I don't care. Like, somebody else is going to talk for me anyway. I'm going to get cut off if I start talking. No, this is what we're going to do. So I'm accustomed to that. So as a result, when somebody says, no, whatever he says we're going to do, instantly I start thinking, then I better know what I'm talking about.
So how does that affect you? Let's flip the script a little bit from a sponsorship back to mentor. Now that you've been sponsored by someone like that, and you're probably sponsoring other people, but did that affect your mentoring?
It did, because my thing now is I'm very open with people I mentor. So I work at Arcadis, and in Arcadis, we actually have a formal mentorship program where they pair you with folks.
That's
So
awesome.
I've been paired with a mentor. So at one point, I was leading an account at the company that was like between $4 and $8 million a year. So they put me with a mentor who was leading an account that was $40 million a year.
Right.
So he was really telling me the secrets and the ins and the outs of what he was doing. Then I was paired with a mentee who worked in administration. So was not driving business or anything like that, and was really at a position in her career where she's trying to figure out where do I go next. I'm trying to do something different in the company, but I don't know how to do it. So I had an opportunity to really just give her the ins and the outs and keep it real. Because my thing is, what's the sense pretending? And tell the truth. I was like, let me tell you the truth. Let me explain to you how this thing works. Let me show you the game. Let me tell you exactly how this works and what you need to do. You know what I mean? She's got a global position now in the company. I don't even have a global position. So she's like, I mean, the door's open for her. She's doing really well. Yeah.
So it's affecting things exponentially, I would
Yep.
say, you know.
So I mean, so as we wrap this up, talk about your own experience as a mentor, and have you been mentored? Have you mentored? Now, where do you see this whole concept of mentoring going as it pertains to bringing the next generation to their position?
Well, you know, I've talked about it before, but you know, one of the things that I want to do in my last 10 years of my career is to spend that time teaching others everything I know. You know, how many times have you been around someone who has that job security mentality? You know, hey, I'm not going to tell anybody what I do because if I tell them how to do it, they're going to cut me out of a job. You know, I'm in my last 10 years, man. I don't care. I'm like, I'm going to tell everybody everything I know. And that's, you know, anybody that wants to come and ask me, how do I do this? Or how have you done this in the past? Right now, I'm mentoring 3 or 4 people, and some of them are out of state in other states. And actually, 3 of them are women. And you just want to, you know, it's one of these things where if someone calls me and says, we want you to help us. And I'm like, look, I'm all in, and I'll spend that time. I'll give that time. Some I do on Zoom calls, and some we do live. I have 2 that I mentor together. You know, when they come in together, one's totally different than the other. One's an introvert, and one's an extrovert, like me and you. And so it's like a totally different person. I don't know how to mentor an introvert. I'm learning. You know, I'm learning how to mentor an introvert. And so I'm reading books about how introverts feel and how to help introverts. I'm reading books called, you know, Emotional Intelligence is one of them I'm reading. One of my mentees actually gave me the book, you know, the memo, which I'm learning a lot from the book, the memo, about how young women of color feel at the table, and I've never thought about that before. So I think when you get, and you know, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, at some other podcasts, but when we get to the ally point, you know, where you're actually becoming an ally and a sponsor, you know, so to speak, of those people, then I'm speaking well of them in the room and out of the room. And I think growing together is something that we're doing as that mentor team moves forward, and as we grow together, it's been really rewarding for me, I would say.
You just dropped a dime when you
Yep.
said job security mentality. Sometimes fear is what drives some people with power to not share their power. Like the
Mm-hmm.
sharing of power is essential to inclusion. That's part of the core of inclusion, sharing of power. And when you're in a position of power and you're afraid somebody might take your job, somebody might outshine you, somebody might get more attention, somebody might leave you in the dust, you try to hoard. And it's amazing what happens. Two things. One, when you understand the value that you bring, you don't have to be afraid. Like for me, I'm intentional to say, hey, I always want to hire people smarter than me. I always want people better than me. Why? Because I'm like, you can't take my job. Because the things that I can do, I know only I can do it. And I can bring in the best superstar that graduates from Harvard with a structural engineering license. You're still not going to be better than me at the things that I can do. And as a result, I have no problem helping you, pouring into you, causing you opportunities to grow because you're you and I'm me. And I'm not afraid of you being your best self because the best version of you is what's going to help us all be successful. So I don't mind sponsoring somebody else, speaking up for somebody else, making sure somebody else gets an opportunity because that doesn't take away from me. You'll never be better than me at being me. You can be better at you, but you can be better at being me. So as a result, there should be no fear to mentor someone and teach them everything you know. Because even after I teach you everything I know, you still can't do what I do better than me. You can do what you do. And I can't be better than you at what you do. And as a result, when you begin to value people as individuals and realize everybody brings something different, and nobody's coming for your job. There's not enough of us. Like that's the thing I realized a long time ago. There's not enough of us. Like look around. We're struggling to staff our companies, our utilities. We're struggling to staff our service providers. We wish we could find more people. So it's actually a negative when one is so obsessed with job security that you wouldn't encourage and pour in and sponsor and mentor somebody else. I'll give you the last word on our mentorship and sponsorship podcast. Bill, close us up.
I think it actually happened today. You know, we were interviewing a young person, and this young guy came in, and he's just a gung ho guy, and I'd heard about him, and heard that he's real, forward thinking and wants to get ahead. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I said, if we hire this person, then this person may only be with us for 2 or 3 years because they're really an up and comer and really smart, really savvy. He's already, got a lot of things going for him. And so I'm like, I would love to just have somebody for 3 years, teach them what I know, help their career. And as long as we get good work out of them for 3 years, I'm fine with that. I'm not afraid to hire somebody who might jump ship on me rather than somebody who's just going to occupy a position and stay for whatever period of time and not be a go-getter and not be somebody gung-ho to go get things done. So I'm not afraid.
And neither
Let's teach them what we know.
hello, and neither am I. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, keep winning with water today. Episode 2 of our podcast, Winning with Mentorship and Sponsorship. See you next time.